President Biden says that the U.S. will stop supplying Israel with offensive weapons if its military moves forward with a full-scale major invasion of Rafah. He made that comment a day after we learned that the U.S. had paused a shipment of roughly 3,500 bombs to Israel over concerns that the weapons would be used in Gaza's most densely populated city. We have team coverage of the developments coming out of the Middle East. Nancy Cordes is standing by at the White House, and we start with Ramy Inocencio there in Tel Aviv. So, Ramy, tell us, how are officials there reacting to the president's remarks that the U.S. will withhold weapons if Israel invades Rafah?
Well, Lana, good to see you. The far-right politicians in Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government have been the most angry and the most vocal. His national security minister, who is an ultra-nationalist firebrand, Itamar Ben-Gvir, posted on X, Hamas loves Biden, and then used a heart emoji. A legislator from Netanyahu's own Likud party said Biden's action not only jeopardizes Israel, but the entire free world. But there were moderate voices, too. The president of Israel, for example, Isaac Herzog, basically told those far-right voices to quiet down, that they were hurting national security, and then thanked Biden by name and said the U.S. is Israel's greatest ally. But I think the larger question is how Israel actually does handle this pressure, the government. We spoke to an Israeli national security expert this morning. That was at the Institute for National Security Studies. And Professor Chuck Freilich told me that the defense establishment is very, very deeply disturbed, and there is a threat of more pauses hanging over them of future weapon shipments, a very, very strong possibility.
And Ramy, I'm hoping you can give us an update on the latest situation in Rafah, because we know so many people in Gaza fled to that area. Is there a timetable of when Israel is expected to take the next steps?
Right. No Israeli military timetable. They didn't give anything as to what might happen next, but they have said that they will be assessing developments. I know it's vague, but that's what they're doing as their operations move forward. Our CBS News producer, Marwan Al-Ghul, though, is in Rafah, has been in Gaza this whole entire time during this conflict. And in the past 24 hours, he's been talking to hospital workers for us. One of them was the chief of the only functioning hospital in Rafah City. That's the Kuwaiti hospital. And he says he feels the booms from Israeli strikes are getting closer, and that there's been shelling only about 600 feet away from the hospital. He says that they're getting closer and closer. He says before the war, though, they might get 10 to 20 patients a day. Now they're getting on the order of 100 to 200. The WHO says hospitals in the south are going to run out of fuel in the next 2 or 3 days. And we know now that the death toll keeps on rising. We're now approaching nearly 35,000 people killed since October 7th. That is according to the health ministry run by Hamas.
And Ramy, on the humanitarian point, we know that a cargo ship is on its way to the U.S.-built floating pier off the coast of Gaza. What more do we know about the process once it's there?
Yes, and according to tracking websites, it's actually just past us here in Tel Aviv, headed south. The name of that cargo ship is the Sagamore, a U.S.-flagged vessel, and it left before dawn this morning. It's headed down to the coast of Gaza, another 50 miles or so to go, and then once it gets there, it's going to unload its cargo to a Navy vessel, and then it will be attached to that floating port that's now in Ashdod, about 30 miles south, once it gets towed down to the Gaza Strip.
All right, Ramy Inocencio for us there in Tel Aviv. Thanks, Ramy. I'm going to bring in now CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes. So, Nancy, President Biden, as you heard from Ramy, he's been facing this mounting pressure, not only on the domestic front to limit weapons shipments to Israel, but is now getting a lot of heat from his Israeli allies. How is he navigating this, and why is he making this decision?
I think it's not at all unexpected that the Israelis would react negatively to this. And so the White House is not surprised. They were prepared for that. They actually did this fairly quietly initially. They didn't announce that they were going to be withholding these shipments. But then the fact that they were doing it was leaked in Israel. And eventually, after a few days, the Biden administration confirmed that it was happening. There's a briefing that has been ongoing over the past half an hour or so by John Kirby, the spokesman for the National Security Council, and he's been making some of the most extensive comments yet from the administration about this decision, about the timing, and what he keeps saying is that smashing into Rafah will not advance the objective of defeating Hamas. So not only is the White House, Lana, saying that they don't want their bombs being used to kill civilians in Rafah if it comes to that, but they're going a step further and saying that if Israel does invade Rafah, they don't think that that will help Israel achieve its own objective of wiping out Hamas. And that's why the White House says they don't want to be a part of it.
But Nancy, this is a major shift in the relationship between the U.S. and Israel. Is the Biden administration concerned about the political implications of this rift?
It is a huge shift, Lana, and they're well aware of that. And they knew that they would get pushback from Republicans. In fact, there was a letter issued by the Republican leaders in the House and Senate just yesterday. They said you're going to embolden Israel's enemies by doing this. But I have to say that the pushback so far has been pointed, but it hasn't been overwhelming. And frankly, they were getting a lot more pressure from the left, from progressives in Congress, from protesters around the country to do more to protect civilians in Gaza. So the White House has been in this situation for weeks, if not months, where no matter what they decide to do, they're going to get criticism and pushback from someone along the political spectrum. And so, they made this choice knowing full well that there would be those on the right who would not be happy about it.
And Nancy, as we're discussing political pressure on President Biden heading into the November election, I have to mention that recent polls show that Americans are concerned with the status of the U.S. economy. We have heard the former president blaming the current president for that. How is the White House trying to reshape that narrative?
They are trying to reshape it by being a lot more blunt and specific in comparing President Biden's record with President Trump's. We've seen a slew of polls now that show that Americans, many of them, a majority of them, think that the economy was better under Trump than under Biden. And what the White House has been arguing for some time now is that that is not true by many measures. Certainly inflation is higher now than it was under Trump and before the pandemic. But they say job creation has been robust and unemployment has been low for years, and salaries are going up at a faster rate. And so President Biden was out on the campaign trail in Wisconsin yesterday, and he made the unusual move of actually speaking from a site in Racine, Wisconsin, where Donald Trump 6 years earlier had held a groundbreaking. He had these golden shovels with then Governor Scott Walker announcing that Foxconn, the Taiwanese electronics giant, was going to be creating 13,000 jobs on that spot. Well, that didn't end up happening. It got scaled back. These things happen. They only ended up creating about a tenth of those jobs. And so Biden was there yesterday saying, hey, I deliver, I make promises and I follow through. And now there is a massive $3.3 billion Microsoft plant that's going to be going in there. And so as much as he can, he is now trying to do a sort of a compare and contrast between his economy and Trump's, while acknowledging that the economy right now is not perfect and that prices are still higher than many people would like them to be.
Yeah, heard him make a point about calling him broken promises by President Trump. All right, Nancy, there for us at the White House. Thank you.
You're welcome.